Every time you wait for someone to confirm you made the right call, your brain burns the same neurological fuel it uses for deep strategic thinking. Stanford's social neuroscience lab found that approval seeking activates the same threat detection circuitry as physical danger, which means you are spending executive function on social survival instead of actual performance. By the end of this video, you will have a 3-step cognitive restructuring protocol that severs that loop permanently, and you can run it in under 4 minutes before your next high-stakes conversation. This is not a video about building confidence through affirmations. It is not about toxic positivity or pretending other people's opinions do not exist. What you are about to see is the actual cognitive architecture, the specific mental structure that separates people who are genuinely free from external approval from everyone else. There is a precise difference in how their brains process identity and threat. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is also one mechanism at the core of this, something most high performers have never been taught, and it sits underneath everything else. That is what this whole video is building toward. Here is the uncomfortable reality. Most high-performing professionals, people who are objectively competent, experienced, and respected, are still running an invisible approval loop in the background of every interaction. They rehearse what they're going to say before a meeting, not to be clear, but to be accepted. They soften feedback, not to be kind, but to avoid disapproval. They delay decisions, not because of missing data, but because they are waiting for a social signal that they are on the right track. UCLA neuroimaging research published in 2019 showed that this loop does not go quiet during work. It runs in parallel with every cognitive task, consuming prefrontal cortex resources continuously. That is not a personality flaw. That is a structural default the brain builds during adolescence when social belonging was literally a survival requirement. The problem is that default was never updated for the professional environment you are now operating in, and it is costing you cognitive performance every single day. The first thing to understand is what approval seeking actually is at the neurological level, because most people misdiagnose it as low confidence, and that misdiagnosis sends them in completely the wrong direction. The brain's social evaluation system runs through the same neural circuitry as physical threat detection, specifically the amygdala and the anterior cingulate cortex. When your social standing feels uncertain, your brain does not distinguish that from a predator entering the room. It escalates cortisol, it narrows attention, it pulls resources away from the prefrontal cortex, the exact region you need for nuanced judgment and creative problem solving. A 2021 study from Stanford's Human Performance Lab quantified this. Professionals operating under social approval uncertainty showed a 31% reduction in working memory capacity. That means when you are in a room wondering whether your idea will land or whether your manager approves of your direction, you are effectively running on 70% of your cognitive capacity. Not occasionally. Every time the uncertainty is present. The practical consequence is direct. The meetings where you most need to perform at full capacity are the exact meetings where approval seeking degrades your output the most. The takeaway here is not to stop caring about relationships. It is to surgically separate social intelligence from social threat. The protocol for that begins by naming the loop out loud to yourself before high-stakes interactions. Before your next important meeting, say this internally: my value is not being decided in this room. That single declarative interrupts the amygdala escalation before it commandeers your prefrontal cortex. The average professional spends 2.3 hours per day in social evaluation mode. That is not distraction. That is cognitive drain that compounds across every task that follows it. People who do not need external validation are not indifferent to feedback. That is a critical distinction. They have built what psychologists at Harvard's Adult Development Study call an internal scorecard, a stable, self-generated evaluation system that runs on personal metrics rather than social signals. Here is how this functions in practice. When most people complete a piece of work, their brain automatically queries the environment. How did others receive this? The evaluation is outsourced. The result is that self-assessment becomes unstable. It fluctuates based on who is in the room, what kind of day they are having, and dozens of uncontrollable variables. Psychologically secure individuals run a different process. They query an internal standard first. Does this meet the criteria I defined before I started? External feedback then becomes data to be weighed, not verdicts to be absorbed. The performance consequence of this distinction is significant. Research from Harvard's longitudinal study found that individuals with high internal scorecard orientation made decisions 40% faster in ambiguous situations and reported 60% lower decision fatigue at end of day. This is why some of your peers seem to move through complexity with less visible strain. It is not that they care less, it is that their evaluation system is not dependent on inputs that are delayed, noisy, or absent. The actionable protocol here is what is called pre-commitment journaling. Before any significant project or decision, spend 3 minutes writing down your personal success criteria in concrete, measurable terms, criteria that you can evaluate yourself without needing a single external signal. This single habit begins migrating your evaluation system inward, and within 4 to 6 weeks of consistent use, it measurably reduces end-of-day decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is not about the number of decisions you make. It is about how many of those decisions involved waiting for someone else's approval first. The third mechanism is the deepest structural difference, and it operates below conscious awareness for most people. There are 2 ways the brain can anchor identity. The first is approval anchoring. Your sense of self is assembled from external signals, how people respond to you, whether you are praised, included, promoted, or deferred to. The problem with this architecture is that it creates an identity that is perpetually provisional. It requires constant maintenance. Every interaction becomes a referendum on who you are. The second is identity anchoring. Your sense of self is built from a stable set of values, commitments, and demonstrated behaviors that exist independent of how any specific person responds to them. MIT's social cognitive neuroscience research demonstrated that people with identity-anchored self-concepts show significantly lower cortisol reactivity to social rejection and criticism. And critically, they recover baseline cognitive function 73% faster after a social setback than approval-anchored individuals. In professional terms, this means when you receive critical feedback, a setback in a negotiation, or a project that does not land the way you planned, an approval-anchored person loses meaningful productive capacity for the rest of that day. An identity-anchored person processes the same event and is back at full function within the hour. The protocol to begin shifting this anchor is called values crystallization. Take 10 minutes this week and write down 3 behaviors, not outcomes, not traits, but behaviors, that you would maintain even if no one ever acknowledged them. Those 3 behaviors become the foundation of an identity anchor. Every time you act on them without external reward, you are literally restructuring the neural circuitry that determines how your brain evaluates threat. Every day you spend approval anchored, you are not just managing discomfort. You are rebuilding the same neural pathway that makes the next social setback hit harder than the last one. Here is the mechanism at the center of everything, the one the hook promised, the one that sits underneath all 3 points you just heard. Earlier, this video said that people who never need validation have a specific cognitive structure most of us were never taught to build. That structure has a name in clinical psychology: self-referential stability, and the research reveals that it is not built through confidence, positive self-talk, or exposure to rejection. It is built through what neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern University calls predictive self-modeling, training the brain to generate its own stable predictions about identity before the social environment can inject its version. Here's the practical structure. It is a 3-step protocol that takes under 4 minutes and is designed to run before any high-stakes professional interaction. Step 1. State your criteria. Name 1 concrete standard you are holding yourself to in this interaction, independent of outcome. Step 2. Name your anchor. Recall 1 behavior from your values list that you have already demonstrated this week. This activates the brain's self-referential network with stable data before social threat circuitry can fire. Step 3. Release the verdict. Say internally, the outcome of this interaction does not determine the evaluation. This is not affirmation. This is a cognitive interrupt that prevents the amygdala from tagging the upcoming event as an identity referendum. What makes this protocol different from generic confidence advice is the sequencing. It does not tell you to feel more confident. It restructures the order of operations in your brain's self-evaluation system before external signals can hijack it. Run this protocol for 14 consecutive days before any significant professional interaction, and the neural pathway shift is measurable. Lower baseline cortisol, faster post-setback recovery, and a documented increase in the quality of decisions made under social pressure. This is the structure. This is what was never taught in school, in most coaching programs, or in the standard self-development content stack. And now you have it. Here is what to put in the comments. Think of the last time you delayed a decision or softened a position because you were waiting for a social signal, an approval, a reaction, a confirmation. Was that approval anchoring, or was it genuine information gathering? Most people discover that the line between the two is blurrier than they expected. Drop your honest answer below. The responses to this one always generate the most useful reflection in this community. If this format is useful, the research first, then the protocol, no filler, then subscribing to Growth Daily is exactly what your professional development stack is missing. Every video on this channel is structured the same way. One peer-reviewed mechanism that is costing you measurable performance, explained in full, with a same-day protocol you can run before your next meeting. Next video on this channel breaks down the neuroscience of why your focus collapses between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. regardless of how well you slept, and the specific 9-minute intervention that prevents it without caffeine or a nap. Subscribe and hit the bell so that one lands in your feed the day it goes live. Your future focus window will appreciate it.